This is Kyle Frasca. I'm from Group 2. We'll be covering Chapter 7, which is Government Policy and International Trade. Some of the topics we talked about in Chapter 6 are mainly international business trade theory. We talked about the new trade theory, stuff like factor endowment, first mover advantage, mercantilism, how specialization can make an economy productive and potentially lead to a positive sum game of trading. Talked about how this could potentially make people lose jobs in developed countries like America, how there would be diminishing returns and lower wages. And then we also talked about how there's actually proof that it says countries that have a liberalized trade regime experience an average increase of 1.5 to 2% growth compared to a non-liberalized one. We talked about some other stuff too, like Porter Diamond. One thing I wanted to mention to tie over to the next chapter is it says that in the textbook, protectionist activities are often more dangerous than the globalization threats. And so hopefully we'll get to cover that in this chapter. So we've already talked about free trade, but sometimes what can happen is that a government might need to protect themselves from competition, or they need to help out businesses inside their economy. So some of these could include farmers. There's lots of regulation around farming. It could be Boeing gets subsidized a lot. Could be maybe green energy, stuff like that. The government will intervene and try and help them out. Or there's say carbon taxes, other things like that. Tariffs, which is a tax on imports, and it could also be exports, in order to raise money for the government often, or to protect domestic products. So the two examples it has here is specific tariffs, which would be a fixed charge. So that's like, say you have a boat, say you have a boat from somewhere and it costs $5,000. Maybe they'll have a fixed charge of, say, $50 per boat shipped in to America. What this would do is make, basically, from what I understand, is that makes competitors from other countries less competitive because they have to charge more. I feel like this strategy would only really work if the technology is similar in America. And then the next one is ad valorem tariffs, which is a proportion of the imported goods. So that would be a percentage. So instead of $5,000 boat and $50, it would say, 10% of the $5,000, which would be like $500 worth of taxed. Of tariffs would be to increase government revenues, force customers or consumers to pay more for a certain import. They're pro-producer, anti-consumer. So they often help the actual businesses, but they're actually worse for consumers. And it says they would reduce the overall efficiency of the world economy. So, one thing that happened in the past, in 2020, I think it was, there was an aluminum shortage in America, and I think Trump had decided to put a 10% tariff on Canadian aluminum, and he did that, but it wasn't just to spite Canada, it was more so in order to fill up their aluminum it would only be until they had so much aluminum. And it was basically, I guess, just a tactic of getting a bit of money for the government there and to protect their own businesses. Yeah. Of government intervention. And it says that it often involves government payments to domestic producers. So it doesn't actually have to be just pure cash that they give them. It could also be low interest loans. It could be, plain cash. It could be tax breaks. So I guess like green, you could think of green energy or something. Or it could be, it says government equity. So I'm not entirely sure what that is. And it says it helps domestic consumers, and it's to compete against low-cost foreign imports and gain export markets, and consumers typically absorb the cost of the subsidies. So, I guess I understand it would be inefficient because, say we have eggs in our market, right? And it's subsidized, say half of it subsidized from them, half of the price is subsidized from the government. Well, I don't know, say they're selling their cartons for $6. Well, they're probably not going to be able to sell them for $6 in a different country. So the profit margin from, like, if you look at it as profit, it would look as like a really small margin. So they're not going to want to expand into a different market with subsidies. There's some other examples though. Like a subsidy could be for a big expanding Canadian company. I don't know. I guess think of, not entirely sure. Like say if Shopify was really big and trying to expand further, the government might give them money so that they can expand into other countries. And they would do that. The reason why giving them money is good is that it would allow them to, if it doesn't work out, allow them to stay an operating business. So what you might not know is that subsidies can actually be illegal. So in this incident in the textbook, in the opening case, it talks about how Boeing and Airbus are heavily subsidized by the EU, I think it is, and the US. And basically the World Trade Organization has already decided what the governments can and can't do when it comes to pumping up businesses. And both of the countries have actually sued against each other because they want to give their business an advantage, I guess. And from the World Trade Organization's point of view, I mean, it's just pure legal, but so I guess that a government can only do so much to pump up one business and bring it up into the limelight. So import quotas, it says restrict the quantity of some good that may be imported into a country. So basically what this means is that there's a restriction. And say you're a company that that you are a cheese factory and you want to import cheese to America. Well, the US might have a restriction in place basically saying, hey, you can only produce so much. And a lot of time quotas are, you have to have like a license in order to trade with the country. And with a normal quota, my family's in the past was actually dairy farmers, and they had a quota. So what that was like is they have to give like a very precise amount of milk out to the public, and they're not they have like an issue where say it's 100 gallons of milk they have to give every, I don't know, so often, every month. What could happen with this is that they're not allowed to exceed the quota or go under. So it could cause issues with, say, the cows, where they can get sick if they don't use get all the milk out of their system, kind of thing. So that's just, I guess, one issue with quotas, but they're actually, they're very, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a government restriction, I'll say that. And then it says tariff rate quotas. It says a hybrid of a quota and a tariff, where lower tariff is applied to imports within the quota than those over the quota. So basically, if I'm producing rice, I'm making rice, and I want to sell rice to America, if I say it's 100 kilograms that I want to, or that's what the quota is. If it's under 100 kilograms, the tariff will be 10%. And if it's over 100 kilograms, it will be 80% tariffs. So obviously, most companies are not going to want to take 80% tariffs, because that's going to wreck their profit margin. And so they're going to produce under what is the quota. And this is really just, I feel like, a punitive measure to make sure that they don't flood a market. And then the last one is a quota rent, which is extra profit that producers make when supply is artificially limited by an import quota. So I guess how this would work is, say you're a cheese factory again from Europe, and say they're really good at making cheese. They could supply 1 million blocks of cheese to the US, but the US only wants them to send in 100,000. What that would do is it would make it really expensive to import to America, just based on the economies of scale. A small company, it would be really expensive for a smaller company that only produces 100,000 to stay competitive. So basically, this, I guess it manipulates competition, and the difference between this more expensive, I guess it's the more expensive European good and the US good that has no quota. It's the difference between those two, and that's what's considered the quota rent, is the artificial profit that they're making. Export restraints. So it basically says quotas on trade imposed by the exporting country, typically at the request of the importing country's government. So how this would work is, say there's an example in the textbook, which was Mexico and another country. Say it is Taiwan. I don't know. Say one, or say that one's really good at producing cars and the other is a little bit behind. One's just cranking out all these cars and sending it to the other one. Well, the other one's going to say, hey, basically it's like, our product's not relevant. Can you ship less cars into our market? And this is good from their side, and it's less threatening to the side that's producing all the cars, because then they don't get taxed. Instead, they just have to produce less and send less to the country. What this often results in the future is a higher price for exported goods because there's a lower amount of them. So it's like the supply is smaller so that people are more likely to buy them, if that makes sense. So it says, and obviously this would benefit domestic producers by allowing their market to be less flooded. It would raise the price of the imported goods. So yeah, that would make sense, like I mentioned. Basically, since they can only produce so many and send them to America, the price is going to be higher. Whereas if they can produce more, the price will be lower for imported goods. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll pass you on to my partner, Phuong. Thank you.